Welcome back. Thanks for coming back. I'll be sharing with you the interesting narrative of the life of Olaudah Equiano, otherwise known as Gustavus Vassa, and he wrote his memoir in 1789. So I'll read it, but I'm adding a bit of commentary, not too much, and breaking it down. The first part here is we're in Africa prior to enslavement, and I know we all long to see what that was like. So I'll start, and it's a little explanation from him about why he's writing his memoir and a way of being humble. Beginning. I believe it is difficult for those who publish their own memoirs to escape the imputation of vanity. Nor is this the only disadvantage under which they labor. It is also their misfortune that what is uncommon is rarely, if ever, believed, and what is obvious we're apt to turn from with disgust and to charge the writer with impertinence. People generally think those memoirs only worthy to be read or remembered, which abound in great or striking events. Those, in short, which in high degree excite their admiration or pity. All others they consign to contempt and oblivion. It is therefore, I confess, not a little hazardous in a private and obscure individual, and a stranger too, thus to solicit the indulgent attention of the public, especially when I offer here the history of neither a saint, a hero, nor a tyrant. I believe there are few events in my life which have not happened to many. It is true, the incidents of it are numerous. And did I consider myself a European, I might say my sufferings were great. I love this subtle jab here. I'm commenting now. The way he calls out white privilege without saying it, and that he's calling it out from 1789. It's like, if I were white, I would say I'm suffering greatly, but I'm not. But when I compare my lot with that of most of my countrymen, I regard myself as a particular favorite of heaven and acknowledge the mercies of Providence or God in every occurrence of my life. If then the following narrative does not appear sufficiently interesting to engage general attention, let my motive be some excuse for its publication. I'm not so foolishly vain as to expect from it either immortality or literary reputation. If it affords any satisfaction to my numerous friends, at whose request it has been written, or in the smallest degree promotes the interests of humanity, the ends for which it was undertaken will be fully attained, and every wish of my heart gratified. Let it therefore be remembered that in wishing to avoid censure, I do not aspire to praise. So it's just being humble right there, or writing in the style of his times. So now to Africa. That part of Africa known by the name Guinea, to which the trade for slaves is carried on, extends along the coast about 3,400 miles from the Senegal to Angola, and includes a variety of kingdoms. Of these, the most considerable is the kingdom of Benin, both as to extent and wealth, the richness and cultivation of the soil, the power of its kings, and the number and warlike disposition of his inhabitants. It is situated nearly under the line and extends along the coast about 170 miles, but runs back into the interior part of Africa to a distance hitherto, I believe, unexplored by any traveler, and seems only terminated at length by the empire of Abyssinia meaning Ethiopia, near 1,500 miles from its beginning. This kingdom is divided into many provinces or districts, in one of the most remote and fertile of which, called Ibo, I was born in the year 1745, in a charming, fruitful vale called Esaka. The distance of this province from the capital of Benin and the seacoast must be very considerable, for I have never heard of white men or Europeans, nor of the sea, and our subjection to the king of Benin was little more than nominal, for every transaction of government, as far as my slender observation extended, was conducted by the chiefs or elders of the place. The manners and government of the people who have little commerce with our countries are generally very simple, and the history of what passes in one family or village may serve as a specimen of a nation. My father was one of those elders or chiefs I've spoken of, and was styled Embrenche, a term, as I remember, importing the highest distinction and signifying in our language a mark of grandeur. This mark is conferred on the person entitled to it by cutting the skin across the top of the forehead and drawing it down to the eyebrows, and while it is in this situation, applying a warm hand and rubbing it until it shrinks up into a thick wheal across the lower part of the forehead. Most of the judges and senators were thus marked. My father had long borne it. I had seen it conferred as one on one of my brothers, and I was also destined to receive it by my parents. Those embrents, or chief men, decided disputes and punished crimes, for which the purpose they always assembled together. The proceedings were generally short, and in most cases the law of retaliation prevailed. I remember a man was brought before my father and the other judges for kidnapping a boy, and although he was the son of a chief or a senator, he was condemned to make recompense by a man or a woman slave. Adultery, however, was let me not rush past that. You see, prior to our enslavement, there was a form of slavery in Africa, but not like the one that we would come to see here. Adultery, however, was sometimes punished with slavery or death, a punishment which I believe is inflicted on it throughout most of the nations of Africa. So sacred among them is the honor of marriage, and so jealous are they of the fidelity of their wives. For this I recollect an instance. A woman was convicted before the judge for adultery and delivered over, and as the custom was, to her husband to be punished. Accordingly, he determined to put her to death. But it being found just before her execution that she had an infant at her breast, and no woman being prevailed on to perform the part of a nurse, she was spared on account of the child. Of course, we're seeing sexism here, and we're not promoting that. So I'm reading what he's describing, how that life was. Africa, before we are taken from it, was not perfect. So you're going to see warts and all in this account. So we go on now. And we're going. The men, however, do not preserve the same constancy to their wives, which they expect from them. For being indulged in a plurality, though seldom in more than two, their mode of marriage is thus. Both parties are usually betrothed when young by their parents, although I've known that the males to be betrothed themselves. On this occasion, a feast is prepared, and the bride and groom stand up in the midst of all their friends who are assembled for the purpose, while he declares she's henceforth to be brought home to her husband, and then another feast is made, to which the relations of both parties are invited. Her parents then deliver her to the bridegroom, accompanied with a number of blessings, and at the same time they tie around her waist a cotton string of the thickness of a goose quill, which none but married women are permitted to wear. She's now considered as completely his wife, and at this time the dowry is given to the new married pair, which generally consists of portions of land, slaves again, and cattle, household goods, and implements of husbandry, farming. These are offered by friends of both parties, beside which the parents of the bridegroom presents gifts to those of the bride, whose property she's looked upon before marriage, but after she's esteemed to be the sole property of her husband. The ceremony now being ended, the festival begins, which is celebrated with bonfires and loud acclamations of joy, accompanied with music and dancing. So yeah, we've gone now, and I'm going to stop here because we're seeing they had marriages. It was polygamous, as he said. The men were polygamous. They could have two wives. See the sermon. I like that idea of the cord that was put around her. Yes, so I love knowing this kind of history because it connects you to something, and I think you can only heal things, only see things clearly if you go to the root of it and start checking at the root. Because whatever happens with the fruit, it started down in the root and the nutrients in the soil. So I hope you enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed sharing it. Thanks for listening.